When do we get the next Fire Emblem? That's what we're all wondering. The Switch 2 is almost out and we have a few questions. When is the release? Is it a remake or not? Is it on the Switch 1 or Switch 2? And what's the game style? But I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. What do you think this next year is going to hold for Fire Emblem? But first, I think we need to talk about release schedules in general.
Pikachu?
So the first question should be, is it time? And why does everyone keep saying this? Now, I wanted to put together a big chart of average release dates for a couple different IPs in the genre. And some of these are Nintendo and some of these are just strategy games. But if you look all the way to the left, we have the most copies sold with Pokemon. Now, we spent an entire day trying to figure out what really counts as a Pokemon game. I think we can all agree, though, they release a lot of them and they make a lot of money. So, in general, what you see is the more money you can make, the more games you release, period. You have Zelda up next with 1.2 years per release, and this includes remakes. You have Donkey Kong at 2.3, Metroid, including the new one, is about 3 years per release, and then you have a huge drop with Fire Emblem coming in at 1.9 years. There are a couple takeaways I want you to pull from this, though, and the first is Fire Emblem gets a lot of attention for an IP of its size. We could probably go back and forth about favoritism, and Smash folks would definitely be on that bandwagon, but the biggest thing you want to look at here is, with 2 years since Engage, it is definitely time for a new Fire Emblem.
You must understand.
The next question to ask is this a remake or not? Now, we've had a huge amount of scuttlebutt over FE4, and with good reason. The leaker that brought us the Engage art has also said that Genealogy is in the works and coming. Now, a lot of folks think that this was that leaker seeing the paralog from Engage and getting those a little bit swapped, because it's been a lot of years and we still haven't seen anything from this. But there's still a lot of excitement to be had from an FE4 remake. It had an amazing reception in Japan. It's got a very in-depth story with a large cast of characters that have a lot of potential and are really well written. One of the big things, though, is you get an opportunity for a lot of quality of life upgrades. The undertaking of Genealogy was just huge, and I mean that in terms of the game and the maps. Really, what they were trying to do was give you an idea of the scale of a war like this, and sometimes it kind of sank under its own weight. You got turns that would last way too long because enemy phase units were just going and going and going. I think this game would benefit a lot from some of the progressions that Fire Emblem has had in the last couple of decades, and it would absolutely benefit from some of the new hardware. But I want to take a step back and look at the timeline in general. Now, what I've done here is taken a general timeline and highlighted in red all of the remakes. And I think this timeline supports a new game, but a lot of this hinges on how IS viewed Engage. Was this an anniversary game that celebrated the past, or was this something brand new that they were putting out? There's some arguments to be made either way, but I like to look at it more as an anniversary game just because of how it played. But the other big argument is that it's FE4's turn for a remake. If you look at the way this is laid out, FE3 Mystery of the Emblem is a sequel and semi-remake of FE1 Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. FE11 Shadow Dragon is a remake of FE1. FE12 New Mystery of the Emblem is a remake of the sequel portion of FE3. And then there's Shadows of Valencia, which is a remake of FE2 Gaiden. That does leave Genealogy of the Holy War as the next up for a remake. And it's not that I would complain about this, but I don't know that I can go out there and say the schedule is as consistent as a lot of folks like to say. I would love an FE4 remake. And in my honest opinion, I think this more supports a new game. But that leads us to one of the biggest questions in Fire Emblem, and that's that, was Edelgard a war criminal or your best girl? Now you can make that statement with this mug that we have in our FEHology store. Listen, it's hard to find Fire Emblem merch, and so we decided to make some of our own. We have a whole bunch of t-shirts and stickers and even notebooks and mugs. Go check it out. But next up, we need to talk about Switch 1 or Switch 2. All right, this is another really interesting topic, and there's pros and cons to each of these. With the Switch 1, you do get a wider user base, and you get known hardware, which means that there is more time and effort spent on story and gameplay, which we do like. They have had some success with this formula. Echoes, although it wasn't the best-selling Fire Emblem, it did hold its own, but the biggest thing is, the best Fire Emblem games have never been about cutting-edge graphics. The best Fire Emblem games have been about story and character. They also have some solid gameplay, but with turn-based strategy, you're not as reliant on teraflops as a lot of these other games are. When you look at the Switch 2, though, you would definitely have better graphics. It is a significant upgrade. I'm really excited about a lot of the stats that are coming out about this, and I cannot wait to have one of my own. And keep in mind, even if this game is released on the Switch 1, you'll still be able to play it on the Switch 2. The biggest reason I'd like to see it on the Switch 2 is more of a commitment to Fire Emblem as a franchise. I'm hoping that they see this as something that will really pull folks into a new console. I want Nintendo to look at Fire Emblem as something exciting that will draw people in. While Fire Emblem doesn't earn as much as Pokemon or Zelda, Fire Emblem Heroes is still one of the highest grossing games for Nintendo of all time at now $1.3 billion. That holds some weight, and I'm hoping that holds some weight to push us into the next console. But I think we need to look at what exactly that would look like. Here's what we know of the Switch 2. We saw its announcement in January, and the Nintendo Direct comes up in April very quickly here. That's going to be followed by the Switch 2 experience, which from what we've seen is going to go from about April to June, and past that is when we should see the initial release of games. If this game is on the Switch 2, I don't think it's going to be a day one release. I don't think it holds quite that much weight. But there are two big windows that they're looking at. The first is trying to get these games ready for the summer so that when kids get out of school, that's the first thing they want to talk about is what Switch game they're going to play. The next we start talking about the holiday bundles, and I do think this is the window where you could start seeing that new Fire Emblem game coming. That puts it at the end of this year or even maybe into the beginning of 2026. Alternately, if this is a Switch 1 title, you're going to see this much, much sooner. It's going to be something that tries to keep people playing the game on that console and keep that console living for a bit longer. Understand there is a happy medium though, and a lot of people are suggesting that this could be a Switch 1 title with upgrades if you play it on the Switch 2. We've already seen a lot about upscaling, and they're going to do some very neat things with that. So keep in mind that no matter what happens, I think this is going to be a good game. I just think if they put it on the Switch 2 solely, it talks about how Nintendo views Fire Emblem. But we need to talk about the game style up next.
I knew you'd miss me.
Now, Engage had a clear Genshin Xenoblade influence on it. Everything was shiny and glossy, and the plot was light, and they could absolutely choose to continue this. My personal preference would be for them to go more the classic Fire Emblem medieval look. Fire Emblem is at its best when it's dark. I keep thinking about moments like finding Layla as just an image with her eyes closed and then pretty much moving past it, or Dimitri eating weeds. That one in particular was almost comedic, but also had a lot of depth to it. And I think a lot of the big moments in Fire Emblem fit that mold. I would like to see more of that. Now, obviously I have a preference here, but keep in mind, Engage was some better writing away from being really an incredible game. I've seen a lot of commentary on things that they could have very easily done to that story, and I'll tell you, they weren't that far off. Either way, I'll be happy with the Fire Emblem game, but I definitely would love to see them go medieval and dark. The other piece of style that I'm really curious about is this back and forth they seem to have with experimenting versus refining. You take Awakening, which was very story-driven and very experimental with new mechanics, and you go to Fates with a refined, improved mechanics, but they kind of let the story slip a bit. You have Shadows of Valencia that polished up an old story and really had simpler mechanics to focus more on that. And you go to Three Houses, which is heavily character driven with tons of experiments in it, but was not even close to mechanically sound. Then you have Engage with a very basic story and very one-dimensional characters. Fire Emblem always likes to walk this line. Do we try out new stuff or do we continue refining? Awakening pushes story, Fates pushes mechanics, Echoes polishes story and mechanics, Three Houses goes all story, Engage polishes mechanics. Fire Emblem is known for pushing the envelope, and I would love to see them try new things. But keep in mind, there are great games on either side of this. I'm just curious where they come out at. If this is a remake, we're more likely to get polish and refinement. It's again what makes FE4 such a good candidate for this. If it's new, they're more likely to experiment. Which one is better? Fire Emblem is at its best, I believe, when it focuses on characters. And I think as long as they do that, we're gonna have a great game. But the big question we need to be asking ourselves is, which of these characters are going to get into Smash? Three Houses was a breakout hit, but that was 6 years ago. Engage, while good, did not come close to living up to that kind of hype. Intelligent Systems needs to find a balance between innovation and solid storytelling if they're going to really have this franchise take off. And I'm excited to see what they do, because one thing unites us all, no matter our opinions. We would all like more Fire Emblem. I have a lot of Fire Emblem Heroes content. That link is here. Members, you are amazing. Thank you for all that you do. Make sure to check out the FEHology Store and take care and schedule an appointment with your FEHologist real soon.